Okay. Start off by drinking some water. Right.
We can also have it in two parts if you want. I mean, like
No,
shorter
this is
duration.
small actually. So
Okay.
this is small. So tomorrow I intend to do a little bit more. Uh,
Okay.
Basically, after tomorrow, the plan should be, if the team is comfortable, Gaurav, that from day after onwards, we should each be able to take one company and start analyzing.
Yeah.
So today will be an introduction to agrochemicals, and tomorrow, hopefully, with some inputs from all of you, I'll try to structure what all how the PPT flow should be for the company analysis. And when we do company analysis, when I say we will do, I mean we, meaning including me and you. So since you are busy in the auto presentation, Gaurav, I
Hmm.
will do one company along with
Okay.
the team. Yeah.
Right.
So maybe I'll pick up Punjab Chemicals if you're not doing it, or maybe I can do Transpec also, which is
Yeah.
not agrochemicals, but I can still do it as an example. Yeah.
Sure. 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 That'll be great.
Yeah, right. So, okay, guys, starting off, and please ask questions. Yeah, wherever, whenever, stop me and ask questions. Yeah. So, I start with some chemicals terminology, and this presentation also, when you're going through it, I have tried to keep it in a way so that it, addresses basic pointers, and we start from basics. So, this is what I think, that I've been able to make something which starts from basics. If you guys agree with it, if you think it explains well, then learn from this presentation. Okay, this is the point I was trying to convey to you, Rishikesh, that day. कि अगर नया topic discuss हो रहा है, तो how can we make it simpler for the audience to digest? Okay, so if there's something to learn from this presentation from that perspective, do take away those learnings. If you guys feel this is not simple enough, especially Kunal and Bhavna, then please give that feedback, so that we can improve it even more. Yeah. Okay. So we start with some basic chemicals terminology. So these are terms that you guys will keep hearing in con calls and reports everywhere. So it's very important you guys completely understand these terms. Yeah. So innovator. Okay. So sorry, there'll be a lot of text in these slides. So please bear with me. Listen to me more maybe. So who is an innovator? So an innovator is a pharma or a chemical company. So a lot of these terms are applicable for both chemical industry and pharma industry, because pharma is nothing but chemicals at the end of the day. So an innovator is a pharma chemical company which is usually based out of regulated markets. Regulated markets are Europe, USA, Japan, um, where they spend huge amounts of dollars in R&D to actually come up with new molecules or novel molecules. Yeah. For example, Pfizer and Merck, when they came up with the COVID vaccines, those were new molecules, new biological molecules which were developed by them, right? Similarly, there are companies like Bayer and Syngenta. Just a second. Yeah, Bayer and okay, not the highlighter, the pointer. Yeah. Bayer and Syngenta are again, I think, both European companies which are innovators in the AgChem space. Okay, so they are the ones who put in a lot of research, a lot of money into research and development to actually discover new molecules. Okay, so they are innovators. So once a molecule is innovated, once they develop a molecule and it gets an approval. So for pharma, there's a body called US FDA, Food and Drug Administration, which approves new drugs. For AgChem also, there is a similar body, I think, but I'm not aware of the name. So once an innovator's new molecule gets an approval, the innovator gets a patent protection period. So the innovator gets a patent for the new discovery, and they get a period where they have a patent protection where no other company can attempt to copy their molecule. Okay, so they are the only ones who get to market that molecule for the most profitable part of the journey of a drug, because obviously there's no competition. They are free to set the price and recover the huge amounts of dollars that they have sunk in during R&D. Okay. The last point is important for the next slide. So there is an increasing trend by these innovators to outsource the manufacturing of molecules to other companies. Okay, so they are increasingly spending more and more of their time in using artificial intelligence, etc., in sort of the very early stages of drug development. okay, which is sort of discovering new drugs. So their time, energy, efforts are going into that. Yeah, they want to spend less and less time in sort of doing clinical trials for the drug, getting it through the regulatory mechanism, and then commercializing and actual manufacturing. They want to do less and less of that part, which is relatively less innovative. They want to spend all their time doing the most innovative, the science and AI stuff, right? Which happens right at the beginning of the life cycle. So keep this in mind. This will be important for our next slide. Okay, so now the opposite of an innovator is a generic. So when an innovator molecule goes off patent, then other companies are free to develop their own versions of the same molecule and sell under their own brand name. Okay. So for example, suppose there's a molecule called paracetamol, which is discovered by, say, Pfizer. Okay. So suppose it has a patent protection period of 15 years. Now the 15 years are over. I think 1 year before the period is over, only other companies are allowed to file their applications. Okay, with the US FDA, for example, if you want to sell in the USA, if the checks pass, if the company, if the imitating company is able to prove to the FDA that the molecular composition and the molecular effectiveness is the same as the patent molecule, then they get an approval to manufacture what is called a generic drug. So a generic drug is only the molecule, and um, it's basically the same molecule as the innovator after the patent protection period is over. So what happens is multiple companies start making the same generic. Okay, so if paracetamol was under patent protection and the patent protection finishes, maybe a lot of Indian companies, maybe some Chinese companies will go in and file their generic applications with the US FDA. Suppose 20 companies will file, 10 companies will get an approval, and therefore, after the patent period, you will have 10 different paracetamol producing generic companies. The innovator sales will start coming down because the generics will price their drugs at a much lower price, right? So for example, uh, say Pfizer had sort of invented paracetamol and they called it uh, some, say for example, Crocin is Pfizer's brand. So Crocin was the innovator brand, okay, innovator brand, but the molecule was paracetamol. So once the patent goes off, this paracetamol can then be made by any number of companies. And suppose Calpol comes into the market, Dolo comes into the market. So these are sort of generic brands that come into the market. Okay. So most generic molecules are developed by multiple players. So there is huge competition on price, and process chemistry excellence becomes important because at the end of the day, your uh, price is what is going to make your product sell. Okay, unless you have a brand power, which we are coming to in the next this thing. Yeah. So there's something called a branded generic. So generic we now understand, right? So branded generic is nothing but a marketing terminology. Okay. So generic drugs, when sold under a brand, are called branded generics. Example, Crocin is a brand of the generic molecule paracetamol. Similarly, Calpol is another brand of the same generic molecule paracetamol. Yeah. Even though two companies may make the same generic molecule, one company may be able to sell more than the other due to brand pull. For example, for a very long time, Crocin used to be the most well-known paracetamol in India. In fact, many people don't even know the word paracetamol. Yeah, they think Crocin is the medicine which sort of reduces fever, right? So this is where the brand of a generic can become important, especially in home markets. So if the Indian companies are making generics and they are marketing it in India, the stronger a company's brand, the more that company can expect to sell. Yeah, provided of course that they are price competitive. Yeah. So branded generics usually work in home markets, example, Crocin, Calpol, etc. When these generics are getting exported, for example, say Sun Pharma or Cipla are manufacturing generic molecules to export to USA, then the domestic company is unlikely to have any brand power because nobody is going to care about in USA is going to care about a brand by Sun Pharma, right? Because nobody knows Sun Pharma there. Yeah. So they have to only purely compete on price there. So any doubts on this slide? These terms are going to keep coming back. So it's important that we understand these terms clearly.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, man, go ahead.
सर आपने इनोवेटर में एक्सप्लेन किए पेटेंट प्रोटेक्शन पीरियड और ये कितना क्रिटिकल है फॉर द सक्सेस
Yeah.
सर आई जस्ट गूगल इसका दिस इज देयर शोइंग 20 इयर्स फॉर इंडिया तो सर ये तो पक्का इनकरेक्ट होगा तो डू यू हैव एनी आइडिया कि सर अप्रॉक्स कितना होता है कि जब अदर कंपनी जनरेट आके दे स्टार्ट कॉपी
नहीं, ये होता है एक्चुअली, मतलब 10-15 साल तो मिनिमम होता ही है मयंक. सो sometimes what happens is there is a lot of politics around this, right? Because at the end of the day, drugs save lives, right? So if there's a drug which is under patent protection, which is so expensive that poorer countries can't buy, there are often governments which intervene and say that, okay, we will have to overrule this patent. So there have been cases where US companies holding patents have been overruled by Indian government for humanity's sake, or things like that. So those kind of challenges can happen. Sometimes the brand themselves realize that, for example,
रैली
your
मार्टिन रैली के साथ आई थिंक ये हुआ था
अच्छा, किसके साथ?
मार्टिन रैली बेसिकली यही हुआ था ही बॉट ऐसी बड़ी छोटी छोटी कंपनी पर स्पेशलाइज इन पर्टिकुलर वो पेटेंट्स और जिनका मार्केट साइज ही बहुत छोटा था तो ये वो वेरी डिपेंडेंट कि आपको इनकी ड्रग तो लेनी ही पड़ेगी एंड देन
Right.
बॉट कंपनीज जैक द प्राइसेस और वो
I see. Okay.
So
Even the same thing happened with COVID vaccines, I think. So the vaccines that were manufactured in India, one of the vaccines was a Russian vaccine developed by Russia by the name of Sputnik. So they did an agreement. I don't remember with which company, maybe Dr. Reddy's. I can't remember exactly. They licensed the molecule to them. Yeah, even though they could have claimed patents, etc. Of course, the settlement process हो सकता है कि I am giving up my patent for this geography, but in return, I mean, they'll negotiate a good price, etc. But still, the price will be lower than the patented price.
so significant होता है मतलब पीरियड
Yeah, patents are very significant. Yeah, you can't, especially because the patents are held by powerful countries, right? So these companies, like I told, they are all out of USA, Europe, and Japan. तो ये सब patent violations ज़्यादा नहीं होता है.
और एक तो उससे
I think
रिलेटेड
this is
सॉरी
one thing that I also wanted to add when you said Nirvan. So
Yeah.
this patent violation, I think this is also one of the more critical aspect towards these world trade agreements with India and
Yeah,
other developed countries.
absolutely.
One is the issue with evergreening of patents. That
Yeah,
is what India doesn't like, and
yeah,
then from their side, it's how the patents are treated, especially for various molecules. Yeah, so
yeah,
that's the idea.
absolutely. So it's a huge global trade issue, and no country can act arbitrarily here. So everybody has to think of the consequences of acting rashly.
अंडरस्टूड सर आपने वही सेकंड पॉइंट फर्स्ट में इनोवेटर में यू मेंशनड आई अंडरस्टैंड कि इनोवेटर का सेगमेंट ही बहुत लिमिटेड होगा जैसे आपने कहा कि कंपनीज जो बहुत प्रॉफिटेबल होंगी जो आर एंड डी पे खर्च कर सकती हैं तो यू मेंशनड है कि इंक्रीजिंग ट्रेंड है कि इनोवेटर्स का कि वो आउटसोर्स कर रहे हैं
Yeah.
तो सो इस पे थोड़ा इलाबोरेट करिए आई एम नॉट एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड ऑलरेडी अगर इतना इनर सर्कल है तो हाउ
तो इस actually the next slide is completely on that. Man. So yeah, I would request you to wait for that. Yeah. Any other questions from Mayank or anybody else? Kunal, Bhavna, you guys understand these terms now?
yes
Yes.
One question.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
So one question: these branded generics, their role would be not just, I mean, their role is branding the generic drugs as well as marketing and distribution, or is it handled by some separate
No,
entity?
usually, see, branded generics, I can only talk in the Indian context. So in the Indian
Mhm.
context, the manufacturer is the one who is also selling and doing the distribution. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So if it is JB Pharma, then JB Pharma is also responsible for pitching it to doctors and making the brand go through. Yeah.
Right.
So brand takes responsibility. Just like, think of it just like FMCG. Like if ITC is manufacturing, ITC is also pushing it in the different retail formats.
My second follow-up question is: are there such business models? Maybe we can find this thing out. Are there business models where, say, a generic manufacturer, they are kind of making almost say 40 to 50% or maybe 70% of the product, and then some branded generics takes that and adds 10%, uh, sorry, almost 20% value addition to it, and then sells it off.
Yeah,
Right?
so that happens. That
Hmm,
happens, especially in the ag chem. We will see that
hmm,
the core material is the technical, right, which is the
hmm,
active ingredient. So
hmm,
after that, there is some dilution, etc., that needs to happen to make it into a formulation, right? If we look at the supply chain, so after the active ingredient technical, you make it a formulation. So um, it often happens that the innovator will only make the active ingredient and pass it on to the, say, the marketing company. The marketing
hmm.
company takes care of the formulation, which is a very low value add activity.
Got it, got it. Yeah, I think in the next slides you would have this one
Yeah,
right in the
yeah,
value
yeah,
chain. Okay,
yeah.
yeah, great presentation. Anyways, yeah, please continue.
Just started. Yeah. So any other questions? Bhavna, Kunal, Bhavna, Kunal, I will expect you guys to ask questions, yeah, because I understand कि तुम लोग को शायद understanding कम होगी. So this is your opportunity to clarify, yeah, if anything is not clear. Okay. Yeah. So next is another set of terms that you will keep hearing and about which you need clarity. So this is linked to my first, the point that I highlighted in the first slide, that innovator companies are increasingly giving out manufacturing to other companies, and they want to focus on the initial drug research, drug discovery, and they want to give out the other aspects to other companies, so like outsourcing. Yeah. So all these three terms are related to this phenomenon, and let's understand how. Yeah. So this slide is made entirely by me. There may be some inaccuracies in terms of the exact phases, etc. But I think this slide should convey the concept to you guys more or less. Yeah. So whatever inaccuracies are there, we can correct later. But the intent is for you guys to appreciate what these terms mean and to get an understanding broadly of what these terms mean. Yeah. So if we look at the stages of drug or molecule development, so it starts with something called preclinical research. Yeah. So this is the phase where companies analyze DNA. They use artificial intelligence to sort of figure out. They take a use case. Say, for example, cancer is the use case. They then try to map DNA, map cell structures, use extensive amount of artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., to figure out different kinds of molecules which can sort of work to solve that kind of disease or issue. Yeah. So this is where basically companies want to focus, the innovator companies, because this is where most of the manpower costs are involved. You need brilliant scientists and researchers to be working in these fields. Yeah. And they spend, I don't exactly remember, but I think each new molecule, uh, the amount that you need to spend to discover a new molecule is increasing every year. It's like reverse Moore's law, right? You guys all know Moore's law. In 18 months, the number of transistors on a chip, they roughly double. Yeah. Although as we reach quantum scale, that phenomenon may not hold. So think of this as reverse Moore's law. With every new drug, an incremental new molecule which has to be discovered has an increasing cost of discovery. Why is that? Because already the easier molecules to discover have already been discovered. So the ones that they are now trying to solve for innovator companies, they are becoming more and more costly. Yeah. So, Mayank, I hope that answers part of your question, that they want to focus on the highest value add, the most difficult part. Yeah. So you start with preclinical research. Then suppose you hit upon a molecule, and in your internal trials, you think that, okay, this molecule might work. Then I think you have to go and, I'm speaking from a US company's point of view, you have to go and register that with FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and you have to say that, okay, I want to trial this. Once you get an approval, you have to go through extensive trials, because FDA will not allow any chemical or any kind of pharmaceutical drug to be approved unless it's 100% proven that the drug is safe for human use. Yeah. So you go through phase one, phase two, and phase three trials. I think phase one trials do not involve humans. The trials happen on animals, etc. Phase two and phase three trials involve humans, right? So you have to form control groups, and over number of years, over different ethnicities, I think you have to conduct a lot of trials. Yeah. So you go through phase one, two, and three trials. A lot of, so think of this as a funnel. Yeah. So this is the start of the funnel. This is the end of the funnel. So a lot of drugs will drop off at this stage itself. Some will drop off here, some will drop off here, some will drop off here. Finally, some will reach the commercial manufacturing stage. Yeah. So this is where all the trials are cleared and FDA gives final approval for commercial manufacturing. So this is where, reaching this stage, an innovator company has a successful drug which can be launched. And from here, the patent protection period will start. Okay. So this is the drug discovery phase. This is called the drug development phase. So these again may not be exactly correct. Okay, so this is from what I remember and from what I could quickly gather. So the phases may exactly not be right, but you get the hint, right? You get the drift that there's a discovery phase, then there's a development phase. Yeah. And then you have a drug manufacturing phase where you know everything. Now you just have to manufacture. Yeah. So So this outsourcing that happens, so innovators are, they are trying to restrict themselves to this, or if there's some work to be done even before this, the say the computational modeling, etc. Drug companies are trying to restrict themselves to these use cases. And the CRO, CDMO, and CRAMS companies are the companies to which the other activities are getting outsourced. Yeah. Now let's understand what are each of these companies which are getting this outsourcing work. Yeah. So the company which is only doing the research work as an outsourcing job is called a CRO, Clinical Research Organization, okay, or Contract Research Organization. I think one of these two. So the C for all of these terms now, they usually represent contract. Just to make sure, just to make it clear that these are all outsourced jobs, right? So CRO is either clinical research organization or contract research organization. So this company specializes in the research phase. It does not touch any of these phases. Yeah. So I think Syngene is one company which specializes in CRO services, in pharma CRO. Yeah, we are talking about ag chem, but all these things work for chemicals as well as specialty chemicals as well as pharmaceuticals. So Syngene is an example from the pharma world. Yeah. Then you have CDMO, which is Contract Development and Manufacturing Organization. So here, after the research, etc., is done, this company will come in and they will start taking over the development and manufacturing along with the innovator. Yeah. So it will start conducting your phase one, phase two, phase three trials. It will start supplying, say, it will start doing test supplies to the innovator. uh, so once you are able to sort of get the drug in very small quantities, you also have to scale it up, so that you can make it for billions of people, right? So that scaling up process apparently is not very easy, because the chemistry may work at very small levels. To make it work for very large levels is another skill. That's where I think the development process, sort of development and manufacturing, comes in. So these CDMO players are basically the ones who are doing the development, and eventually if the drug succeeds, then they do the manufacturing. So if the drug doesn't succeed, then they get paid only for the development activities that they do, and then the drug drops off from their pipeline. Yeah. So the beauty of these contracted models, and why these contracting companies are becoming very talked about and very lucrative from investment point of view, is because they are paid. Their downside is very limited. If you sign a contract as an innovator, you have to pay them for the services that they give, whether the drug eventually succeeds or does not succeed. If the drug succeeds, it's great for the CDMO company, because it will most likely be also the company which will be manufacturing a large part of the successful drug. If the drug is not successful, it doesn't lose anything. It anyway got paid for whatever development activities it did. Yeah. And CRAMS is an organization which does this process end to end. So this is a contract research and manufacturing service. Yeah. So basically, it is CRO plus CDMO. That's the way you should understand this. So end to end, from research to commercial manufacturing, entire thing it can do. Yeah. So these are the full forms. There's another term called CMO, which is basically a contract manufacturing. So this company will only be involved in this phase. So just like CRO is involved here, I should have actually drawn CMO here. So this company was, say, not involved till this phase. Say the innovator company did all these four phases, and then it decided, ठीक है अभी scale up करना है. I don't want to do this scaling up business. So let me find a competent manufacturer who will do the commercial manufacturing for me. So that outsourced player is going to be a CMO, a contract manufacturing organization. Sometimes it happens that, say, an innovator appoints a CDMO, okay, and it does phase one, phase two, phase three. The drug becomes successful, but the innovator is not happy with the CDMO's performance, say on time performance or cost or whatever. Sometimes it happens, it is rare, but sometimes it happens that it will change the partner at this phase. During the commercial manufacturing, it will not give the business to the CDMO player, but to a new CMO, right? So that's where the CMO comes into the picture. Yeah? Two very important things to understand about this CRO, CDMO, CRAMS business is that it is a very, very high trust business. So imagine the innovator company has to trust the outsourced company so much so as to give up all its IP to that company. Because without the IP, the company can't do trials, can't make trial batches of manufacturing, can't scale up commercially. Yeah. So imagine the amount of trust the company, the innovator company sitting in USA, Europe, Japan has to have with, say, an Indian company, that they will not leak their IP, or that they will not start second-hand manufacturing their own product, bypassing this innovator. That amount of trust needs to be there. Yeah. And once that trust is established, also, if say a CDMO player is finalized or a CMO player is finalized, I think the innovator company has to notify the FDA that this so and so company will be manufacturing the drug for me, and it goes into the FDA document. Yeah. Once a company is approved in an FDA document, to change that company is a big headache. It takes a long amount of time, and no innovator company will want to waste time during the patent protection period. Yeah. So what is the result of this? That this business, once won by a CRAMS or CDMO company, is very sticky. Once you win the business, you are very less likely to lose the business, right? So it's sort of like the innovator and the CRAMS company getting tied together, getting their feet tied together and being in water, right? You both have to swim. If one of you stops swimming, the other one also sinks, right? So it's a very tight symbiotic relationship, which is great for a CRO, CDMO, CRAMS company, because एक तो रिस्क नहीं है. तुम जो इन्वेस्टमेंट्स कर रहे हो उसमें पार्ट फंडिंग आ रही है इनोवेटर की, राइट? फिर तुम्हारे को कोई रिस्क नहीं लेना है. ड्रग फेल भी हुआ तो तुम्हें पैसे मिलेंगे तुम्हारे काम का, राइट? ऑन द अदर हैंड, if you're able to do a good job during this development phase, you get to win big in the manufacturing phase. Yeah. So yeah, so this is CRO, CDMO, CRAMS. Any questions, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So majority of company India context में फिर CDMO और CMO की basket मिलाई करेंगी कि there is
Yeah.
massive overlap between it.
Yeah. So actually, since I am not a pharma expert, I can't confidently say these things. So please take all of these things with copious amounts of salt. But there are so the premier organization in India when it comes to sort of CRO is Syngene. So Syngene is a subsidiary of Biocon. All of you guys must have heard of Biocon. It's one of the oldest and most renowned pharma companies out of India. You have other CDMO companies like Divi's. Yeah, Divi's is another Nifty 50 company. Then you have smaller companies like Laurus Labs. You have companies like what's that other company, Gaurav? I'm not able to remember. Venkat Jasti's company. Uh,
Tharocare.
no, not Thyrocare. Thyrocare is a diagnostics company.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which one?
वेंकट जस्ती जिसका सीईओ है यार, अभी बिका ना वो कंपनी, आई एम फॉरगेटिंग. I'll get back to you guys. It's a Hyderabad-based company. Basically, Divi's Labs and Syngene.
So
These are
when
Suven, yeah, Suven Pharma. So Divi's Labs, Syngene in that order. Syngene, Divi's Labs. Then you have Laurus. Then you have Suven. Yeah, these four are safely. You can say that they are sort of CDMO companies and not pure CMO companies. So CMO companies there are more, right? So even
Mhm.
Piramal Pharma is a sort of a CDMO company with a large component of CMO. They do more CMO than development. There are other CMO companies. Yeah. So obviously, um, see, CMO can be done also for a generic molecule. Yeah.
Mhm.
Suppose a patent has expired, and after patent expiry, also there'll be like two, three large players, right? Who are controlling that molecule. So those large players might also sometimes outsource their manufacturing because those large players are maybe European players. They don't want to manufacture at high cost in Europe. They say, "चलो तुम करो ये वाला." ठीक है. But उसमें क्या है? The barriers of entry are much lower. Another company can tomorrow crop up and say that मैं मुझे भी बनाना आता है ये molecule. So I will also start making. So CMO is less lucrative than CDMO, and CDMO is less lucrative than CRAMS. CRAMS is basically as good as a partner जिसका हाथ पैर सब बंधा हुआ है innovator के साथ, right? So the higher up this value chain, from right to left, the higher up that you are, the better it is as a business model. Yeah. So those are the 4 5 pharma companies which are sort of CDMOs. In the agrochemical context, there is only one Indian company which has cracked this model absolutely, and it's been a huge compounder. In the last 10 years, it's created immense wealth. That company is called PI Industries. PI Industries. Yeah. So it has scaled up hugely, and most of its revenue comes from providing CDMO services to agrochemical innovators. Yeah. Punjab Chemicals is another company which gets about 20 to 30% of their revenues right now from CDMO. Remaining 70% is generic manufacturing. So CDMO basically happens when the molecule concerned is an innovator molecule, when it's under patent. Yeah. Otherwise, it becomes sort of CMO. So CDMO is obviously more valuable, yeah, because it's very less likely that another competitor will come in, etc., etc. So Indian market, as you said, your question, Mayank, it's not yet at the scale where it can become innovators. So
Mhm.
we are very much on the contract side, but gradually we are moving up the value chain here. Yeah, from generic manufacturing, we are gradually moving up to CRO, CRAMS, and CDM.
Yeah,
Understood.
one thing that's worth mentioning is the cost of biotechnology professionals like PhDs and all. They are
Yeah,
almost, I think, one fourth of what is available in a
exactly,
developed country of
exactly,
similar quality, and that's why CRO is also very interesting.
absolutely.
Thought
That's a
that.
very good point, actually. One of the key reasons that India will sort of be able to probably beat out a lot of competition from even China, because the cost of similar resources in China is probably 2x of India, right? So India, at least that's what I hear the pharma experts saying, that we have a lot of untapped science potential sitting in the country, which is why CDMO has a, they call it a sunrise industry, which will have a bright future in India.
And I think CDMO can easily go and extrapolate to a CRO. I mean, CRO plus CDMO, like that's the evolution, I guess. CDMO to CRAMS.
Yeah, probably because obviously CDMO is, I think, easier than CRO, maybe, or CRAMS.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the evolution. Yeah, you start with CMO, then you get into, you earn the trust to
Yeah.
put an innovator molecule, and then you probably start getting involved in research as well.
Also, I think one thing that we need to find out, I also don't know, but I'm interested, is what is the percentage of expense at each of these levels? That would be very interesting to see. I mean, so for example, in preclinical research, you spend say 20% of the
Yeah,
cost at phase one, something, phase two, something, and also the riskiness. So I was listening to something, some I think podcast or something, and that person was saying that at phase three, it's very easy to kind of get into a company because the chances of it going to an FDA, I mean, getting the FDA or just at the end of phase 3 or midway if phase 3,
Yeah,
it's more probable, and
yeah.
suddenly you will see a uptick in the prices and all of those things.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
so
So,
that
so
sort of a
basically, Gaurav, that's a very good question. And if you can note it down, maybe questions from this session, if one of you can note it down, and maybe, on Notion, we have a thread on
mm,
sort of this. So, which is why, Gaurav, I think being on the contract end of this business is much better than being on the innovator end of this business. Now, the new trend in USA is for a lot of small biotechnology companies to startups to come up, which don't have the capital to, even if they want to, they can't do this whole phase, right? So they are purely restricted to the very initial drug discovery part of it. Now understand the kind of business model that if they work tremendously hard, sink in a lot of equity funds, everything, and that the molecule fails at phase 2, the company's existence might be under question, right? Similarly, if it succeeds, then the company can become a 100 bagger. But if you're on the other end, CDMO, you get hundreds of such biotechnology companies. Whether the molecule fails or not, your existence is not in question. Yeah. So you get high margin business even at these phases. And of course, if there's commercial manufacturing, your margins come down a little, but your scale increases rapidly. Right. So as
and
an investor looking to
can
own
I add,
businesses,
can I
yeah,
add something, Nirvan? I just,
yeah, go
sorry
ahead.
for interrupting you.
Yeah,
The last part of it is when the patent goes off, then also they have the first mover advantage because they were manufacturing the drug previously.
yeah, right. That's also true. That's also true. Yeah.
Yeah, please, sorry, I interrupted.
No, no, no. So I was just saying that as an investor, therefore, like if you understand probabilities and if you understand volatility and don't are not in love with volatility, you are probably going to vote in favor of more stable business models, which are on the contract side, rather than the innovator side, which is very, very uncertain, right? So companies of the size of Pfizer and Merck, they have the size to withstand 2 3 failures, but increasingly biotech companies are doing the major innovation. So yeah.
So one good example also will be AstraZeneca. So, for example, in a Cambridge University, they found out COVID vaccine, and from there, I think uh, our Punawala's company.
Yeah,
What's his
yeah,
name?
correct.
So basically, that's also a CDMO, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a CDMO. That's
Hmm.
that's a CDMO where the patent was waived off, right?
Yeah,
So
it was waived off.
yeah, that's an example of humanity taking
No,
precedence over.
patent was not waived off. It was
uh,
not waived off.
I mean, it was. I think this was branded also separately. No, this was not under
Ah,
AstraZeneca's brand. So there
yes.
must be a level of patent waive off somewhere. I don't think we could afford to give the vaccine at the price we have been giving if AstraZeneca had stuck on to its patent rights.
Right. No, I mean, will you call that patent waiver? Or I think there was like the
Some
licensing part
negotiation.
was, yeah, the licensing part was kind of
Yeah, yeah.
taken care of.
So I mean, if it was a normal course of this thing, they would have enjoyed patent protection for many many years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And no licensing, nothing of that sort would have happened. Even if licensing would have happened, it would have happened at much higher costs, etc. So, but this was an emergency, and obviously, the
Yeah, yes.
companies
Then
also.
Serum Institute could have kind of started to sell it everywhere.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So
right.
Serum Institute obviously commands that level of trust and respect that innovators are able to give their IP without worrying about those kind of things. So Serum Institute might be the most valuable unlisted company in India, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? Bhavna, Shantanu, Kunal, Rishikesh. Okay, a quick check, guys. Bhavna, how much of this are you understanding on a scale of 1 to 10?
This one I actually understood everything that you told.
Great. So on a scale of 10, just for my satisfaction, the 2 slides that we have covered, what is your understanding level?
I'll probably give it a 10.
Great. Awesome. Brilliant. And Kunal?
Yeah, I also understand these slides till now.
Okay, so eight level of
Yeah,
understanding will
eight,
run.
eight, nine.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so now we move to the agrochemical part of it. अब तक हम जो बात कर रहे थे, we were talking about generic terms which are applicable for specialty chemicals, pharmaceuticals, as well as agrochemicals, right? Because at the end of the day, they are all drugs. Now we come to specifically the agrochemical supply chain and the diagram that all of you have seen multiple times. Uh, I've mentioned the source clearly below. This is one other practice that I would encourage you guys to pick up in your presentations. Whenever you're citing a source, even if it's from the annual report or something like that, try to cite it. Yeah, either on the same page at the bottom in a smaller font, or at the end, if you can have some kind of slide number wise links, please maintain it. So one, it helps us do a sanity check. If we doubt a number, we don't have to ask you, etc. We can just refer to your link and confirm. And second, it's good practice because some of these videos are on YouTube and public. Yeah. So we don't want anybody to sort of, suppose we've picked something up from a tweet or picked something up from a research report. We don't want some people to think that we are, using material without giving due credit. So it's a good practice. Do keep in mind and try to follow it in your presentations. Yeah. So yeah, again coming back, this is the value chain. This is the end-to-end value chain for the agrochemicals. Yeah. So it starts with raw materials. Raw material क्या होता है? Raw materials are chemicals basically. So benzene, um, phenol, things like that. These are raw materials. ठीक है. वहां से you make something called intermediates. So intermediates are sort of a little more complicated. दो तीन chemical reaction raw material के साथ कराने के बाद you get intermediates. Yeah. So there are some companies which specialize in making intermediates. They don't go higher up the value chain. Yeah. Then this is where most of the action happens, and most of the, if you have to divide like raw material का खर्चा से शुरू करके रिटेलिंग का खर्चा, इफ यू ट्राई टू डू अ वैल्यू चेन बिल्डअप ना, कि 100% का रॉ मटेरियल आने के बाद 1000% का फाइनल मटेरियल बिकता है, तो द मोस्ट वैल्यू एडिशन विल हैपन इन दिस पार्ट. या मे बी यहाँ 100 का 200 बनेगा और 200 से 800 यही बनेगा, right? So 600 का value addition यहाँ पे होगा. Then you will get some 50 rupee value addition here, 100 rupee value addition here, another 100 rupee value addition here for the final retail price. Yeah. So the most activity and the most kind of value addition happens in the active ingredient slash technicals. The active ingredient is the paracetamol. Always remember this example. Paracetamol is that chemical uh, which makes that tablet effective in doing its job at reducing fever. Similarly, every chemical, every pesticide, every herbicide will have a particular molecule or a particular chemical which will do the job of killing the pest or killing the herbs. And that molecule cannot be applied in its native form. It has to be diluted. It has to be put in a particular water soluble or whatever form. That is called formulation. So formulation is nothing but taking the main material. वो जो गौरव एग्जाम्पल बोल रहा था ना कि 80% वैल्यू एडिशन करके बेच देते हैं इनोवेटर्स, उसके बाद 20% वैल्यू एडिशन करके मार्केटिंग कंपनीज आगे उसको सप्लाई करते हैं. तो दिस इज दैट एग्जाम्पल वेयर ऑल द science happens here, some of the science happens here, and this is not science. This anybody can do. Notice this: small contractors. There are no barriers to entry in creating formulations. So formulations is basically तुम्हें केमिकल मिल गया, मान लो तुम्हें पीआई इंडस्ट्रीज ने केमिकल बना के सप्लाई कर दिया, यू आर अ लोकल शॉप इन पंजाब, यू हैव अ स्मॉल फैक्ट्री, 10 लोग काम करते हैं, and you just have to dilute that chemical in a particular sort of measure and package it and then send it out for marketing. Okay, so this is where most of the action happens. And the way this industry is sort of divided is, again, this can be generic or this can be patented, right? If the active ingredient, whoever the innovator is, if they have lost the patent protection period, then it becomes a generic active ingredient. If it is still under patent protection, then it becomes a patent, then it remains a patented active ingredient, right? So who are the innovators here? These are all European and American and Japanese companies like Bayer, Syngenta, FMC, Sumitomo. This is a Japanese company, Kureha, etc. Okay, and CRAMS players in India. The hathi of the CRAMS player in India is PI Industries. Baki sab chunnu munnu hai. Punjab Chemicals is one of the other chunnu. Okay, but this is actually the only guy who has made a name for themselves so far in agrochemical CRAMS, yeah, PI industries. And then generic banane ke liye, all companies make generics, including PI industries and Punjab Chemicals. All companies, so India Pesticides, Rallis, UPL is a gigantic company. So if you guys check market caps, UPL is the largest market cap agrochemical company in India. आई थिंक कुछ उनका सेल्स ही कुछ 50,000 करोड़ का सेल्स है शायद, इफ आई एम नॉट रॉन्ग, और मे बी दैट्स मार्केट कैप में गड़बड़ कर रहा हूँ शायद, बट इट्स अ ह्यूमस कंपनी. Then you have small companies which did an IPO this year, like Heranba. Yeah. Then you have Aztec Life Sciences, etc. So basically, generic सभी बनाते हैं. Patented में CRAMS सिर्फ एक दो लोग करते हैं, right? I'll cover some more names in the following slides. So what happens is active ingredient बन गया, उसके बाद उसका formulation बना. Formulation बनने के बाद you have to do the marketing, right? So you have to have a distribution. So just like FMCG companies have distribution, even AgChem marketing companies need to have distributions. So local shops in rural areas who जिनके पास farmer जाके अपना खरीद सकता है सामान, राइट? पेस्टिसाइड हो, हर्बिसाइड हो, फंगिसाइड हो, जिनके पास जाके वो खरीद सकता है. सो डोमेस्टिक में marketing companies are all these companies that you see here. Yeah, all of them are into domestic marketing. Global marketing, there are only a couple of Indian companies which do global marketing of generics, which is Sharda Cropchem and UPL. Yeah, we will see why there are very few companies here, and of course, innovators are there. Innovators will do global marketing, right? But in terms of generics, all these players are usually playing in the domestic market in India. Only two companies, Sharda and UPL, they sell generics outside of India. Okay? So distributor के पास आया, फिर retailer के पास गया, and then you finally the farmer purchases it. Yeah. So there are three kinds of players in the Indian agchem industry. So if you remember this value chain or refer back to this value chain and understand the three different kind of agchem players, you will always have a solid foundation from where to start your company analysis, because your company will fall in one of these three buckets. Yeah. So one is domestic agchem players. So these players who are selling agrochemical formulations to distributors in India. Okay, so domestic means India, and agchem marketing companies or agchem players, meaning that they are selling the final product, which is the formulation, in the domestic market. Okay, then you have active ingredients slash technical manufacturers and exporters. So these manufacturers, they also export. So they are these guys, the CRAMS guys, yeah, who are making active ingredients and technicals, and also the generic guys. So these CRAMS guys are making these for innovator molecules. The generic guys are doing this AI technical manufacturing for molecules for which the patent is over. Yeah. Number three, you have global marketeers, which in India's case is mostly Sharda Cropchem and UPL. Yeah, so they are basically selling generic formulations abroad, outside India. Okay. So any questions here? The next three, there are only three more slides, and the next three slides are each on one of these three. So with that understanding, is there any other question at this point?
No, nothing from my side.
Cool. So yeah.
In case I miss, like, what exactly in formulations is happening?
So formulations is, Surendra, basically the active ingredient is the main chemical which serves the purpose, right? So whatever, if it's a pharmaceutical drug, say for example, a fever reducing drug, then paracetamol is basically the chemical compound which is doing the job, right? Formulation is basically the final form in which that medicine is administered to a patient. So making of that tablet, so for example, say paracetamol is a liquid, right? Converting that liquid to a tablet form, which is ingestible. Ingestible means which is edible by the human, is the formulation. So the formulation is the final form in which the medicine is taken by a human for a pharmaceutical, or by the administered to the crop if it's an agrochemical.
Yeah, like in most of the cases, like it will be done by these manufacturing things, right? Manufacturers.
Can you
Those
make
who distribute,
Yeah,
the
so
final
what
product.
happens what happens is so this distribution companies, na Surendra, they may or may not do this formulation because it's a very low value add activity for the agrochemical industry. Okay. For
Okay.
pharmaceutical, it's a little different because it goes into humans. There is a lot more strictness and stringency there. So there the formulations is not as commoditized and as low value add as an agrochemical. In agrochemical, small contractors do this job, and the marketing companies then take this and sell. Yeah. Now, whether the marketing companies manufacture the active ingredient and technicals or not, we'll cover in the next slide. But just
Okay.
understand that formulation is a low value add. Moving from active ingredient to formulation is a low value add activity. Making this active
Yeah.
ingredient is where all the science lies. Yeah.
Yeah. Got. Thank you.
Yeah. So, good question. Thanks for asking. So, guys, whenever you have to, um, you know, understand what formulation is, think like the example that I gave, that there is a particular chemical which does the job of reducing fever. The chemical is paracetamol. Uh, Formulation is just the form in which I'm taking it, which is tablet in this case. You also get liquid paracetamols, right? So, in that case, the formulation is a liquid formulation. Yeah. Okay. So moving to domestic agchem. Oh, sorry, I forgot to add. I forgot to add animation here. Sorry about this. This will be distracting, but I hope that my pointer will sort of do the job. Sorry about this, guys. So you have branded B2C players, okay, in the domestic agchem. So we are focused right now on these companies. Just try to imagine these are companies selling final formulations to distributors who will be selling in turn to the farmers for applying to their crops. Okay, so this is the animal that we are right now going to talk about. So who are these
Sorry,
guys? Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but could you
Yeah.
please repeat that, whatever you just said, to the
So
farmers? Wala?
yeah,
I
so
missed.
basically the domestic ag chem players, Shantanu, this is the
Yeah,
first category. So they are these guys, right?
yeah.
Uh, what they are doing is they are selling the final formulation, which is the final medicine, the herbicide, pesticide, fungicide,
Okay.
to distributors or retailers, who are in turn going to sell it to farmers who will finally apply the final product on their farms.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, no worries. A company will never sell directly to farmers, right? It cannot reach. So, just like FMCG companies use retailers and distributors, similarly, they also do the same. Yeah. So, who are these guys? They are branded B2C players. B2C because their end consumer is a farmer, right? So, that's a B2C industry. Branded because each of these companies will have their brands. So, Rallis will have their own pesticide, Dhanuka will have their own branded pesticide. So, it's like बिस्किट जैसे बिकता है ना, 5 बिस्किट गुड डे भी है तुम्हारे पास कुछ और भी है, मारी बिस्किट भी है. तो similarly, think of it like that. Yeah. They sell formulations to retailers, distributors, who in turn sell them to farmers. Yeah, this is important. They mainly buy the AI technicals from China or innovator companies or from CRAMS players in India. They mostly don't make their own technicals. So the most important, most valuable part of the value chain, they don't contribute here. Yeah, they buy this more or less. Yeah, and then they outsource the formulation. So there you can see that it's an asset light business. ना तो active ingredient बनवा रहे हैं, ना formulation खुद बना रहे हैं, right? Active ingredient खरीद के they are passing it on to the contractors who are making the formulation. Then they are just putting their brand on it and they are selling it through their distribution network. Yeah. So new products are brought in via in licensing from innovators. If it's under patent, you have to bring it in via licensing. This process can take anywhere between 3 to 5 years. Yeah. So if a company, I don't understand this industry very well yet, so I don't know like if some companies can have an advantage in this process. Of course, if you have an advantage, it's great because if you are able to bring in more in licensed products, whereas your competitors can't for some reason, then you get a 3 to 5 year head start, right? Because the other guys will take that much more time. to get it in. Yeah. What are the industry characteristics? Again, these are all mostly picked up from Harsh's video. These are not from my own analysis. Okay. So this is just to give you guys and myself and Gaurav a feeler of the industry. So don't get stuck on any of these points. Just try to create a framework using these points in your mind. We'll refine the framework as and when we originally understand better, right? Right now, this is second-hand learning. As we start reading the companies, we'll start refining this framework. Maybe at the end of 2 weeks, we'll have a better framework. So right now, just use this as a starting framework. So what are the characteristics of this industry? High ROC, क्योंकि capital intensity is low, right? Because for the reasons that I said, खुद कुछ बना नहीं रहे हैं, तो ज़्यादा factory वगैरह है नहीं उनका. It's mostly a distribution business. The growth of this industry is low because Indian domestic market में agrichem बेच रहे हैं. तो Indian agriculture का जो growth है, it's highly correlated to that. And that Indian agriculture grows mostly at the nominal rate of growth of Indian GDP. Can anybody tell me what is the approximate nominal rate of growth of Indian GDP?
For 2023, they're expecting around 7.3 something.
Okay. So the GDP growth figures that you guys keep hearing now, that World Bank has upgraded India, IMF has downgraded India, those are not nominal growth rates. Okay. Those are real GDP growth rates. So real GDP growth rate is growth rate before taking inflation into the picture. Yeah.
वही around 14%, right? 14
हाँ, मतलब
15%.
14-15%, या अभी थोड़ा स्लो डाउन हो गया, तो अभी
हाँ.
मान लो 6% इन्फ्लेशन, 6% रियल ग्रोथ या 5% रियल ग्रोथ मान
12
के 11-12%. Yeah.
12%.
So Shantanu, you know this, right? You're an economics.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think आप दूसरों को chances दे रहे थे. No worries. So 10-12% is what the nominal GDP growth rate is. Yeah. So Indian agriculture industry is also growing more or less at the same speed as Indian GDP. उससे ज्यादा growth तो हो नहीं रही है, right? More or less population भी अब धीरे धीरे stable हो रहा है इंडिया का, and arable land etc. is also not increasing anymore. So what this is from historical, this is not a projection. Historically, this segment, the domestic agchem players, they grow at the same rate as the nominal GDP growth rate of India, which is around 10-12%. Okay. And the barriers to entry are moderate. Yeah. So low capital intensity because lower value addition. Main barriers to entry, like you might have guessed, they are brand and distribution, right? क्योंकि तुम खुद कुछ बना तो नहीं रहे हो, तो जितना अच्छा तुम्हारा डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन है, जितने ज्यादा फार्मर्स को यू आर एबल टू रीच, और जितना स्ट्रांग तुम्हारा ब्रांड है, जितना तुम ब्रांड पे खर्चा कर रहे हो, या जितना पुराना तुम्हारा ब्रांड है, उतना तुम यू विल बी एबल टू सेल मोर, राइट? सो a new company tomorrow, if they decide कि अच्छा ये तो पूरा आउटसोर्स बिजनेस है, I'll just buy from China and I'll start selling, it's not that easy. Because why will a farmer start buying, Nirvan Chemicals ka pesticide? It won't. Farmers won't, right? Because brand is a moat. So brand and distribution are the barriers to entry, main barriers to entry. This is very important because the sales are restricted only to India, and India's agriculture is heavily dependent on monsoons. So the demand is heavily dependent on monsoons. So if the quality of monsoon is poor, then you can expect a poor year for these kind of domestic agchem players. Yeah. So the overall market size, this data may be a little dated, maybe 1 or 2 years dated. So we need to capture the correct data. The updated data is around 16 to 20,000 crore INR. And an interesting insight from Harsh is that once a company hits 800 to 1,000 crore revenue mark, in this space, they struggle to grow beyond that. तो मतलब 1,000 crore के आसपास आके growth becomes difficult because they are at around 5% of industry, right? At around 1,000 crores. So
This is sales, right?
Yeah, this is revenue. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so they slow down sort of after hitting 800 to 1,000 crore revenue. This we can verify. These are the main companies. PI Industries is of course an exception. It has grown much larger, but it has grown larger thanks mainly to CDMO, not this segment. So here, Rallis India, Haranba, Punjab Chemicals, Bharat Rasayan, India Pesticides, Aztec, Insecticides India. All these companies we'll have to analyze. Yeah. So these are the major companies in this space. So I'll move on to the next category. Before that, quick check. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
But I think one risk for the general agchem industry is also the infertility that is happening in the soil. I'm not sure how that gets connected.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a risk, Gaurav. And what I was reading is that biofertilizers and
Hmm.
bio sort of agrochemicals are gaining salience. But unfortunately, still, I think I don't remember whether it's a global data point or an India data point, but only about 4% of total agchem sales are still bio in nature. So it's
Okay.
very much in the infancy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
But
2% only, like
yeah,
biochemicals.
right, right. So,
Yeah,
but it is expected to grow. Indian companies have been talking about it for a very long time.
very
So
long
Harsh,
time.
yeah, Harsh mentioned in his video that Sharda Cropchem has been talking about bio agrochemicals for 8 years, but not much has moved so far.
Right. Another thing that I would like to know is the percentage of agrochemical per hectare in India versus the world. That could be, I mean, one interesting data point, don't you think?
Um, yeah, in terms of like, what is your hypothesis on this? What are
So
you expecting?
in India, most of this agricultural work, it's very fragmented. So it's like one person doing the job, right?
Mhm.
However, due to this urbanization and all, lots of people are getting into gig work and all. My hypothesis is, and also learning from a lot of people who have farmlands, is that they contract it out to other people. So if say not today, but like there is some aggregator who kind of cultivates an entire land, say more than 10 hectare, 20 hectare, they'll use industrial, I mean, they'll use automation over there, like
Yeah,
tractors and all of those things,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then the usage of fertilizers will also be very rational over there. I'm not
yeah.
sure if that is happening, that trend is going on, but
No, that
that
is
would
true.
be.
I think India's problem with lower size of farm holdings, I think, causes these issues.
Hmm.
So one clear issue is that lack of mechanization, because smaller farms you can't afford to buy, big equipment to increase the yield. So I
Hmm.
think to compensate for that, people sometimes might use extra, chemicals.
Yeah,
So it
there are
is
two three
possible.
triggers for this. One is that digitalization of maps. That is one very big trigger
Mhm.
by which people can give it out. I was hearing one article, reading one article on it, and sorry, I forgot the other trigger. Maybe I'll update it later. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And also some of these points, Gaurav, if you're capturing, it'll be good.
Mhm.
Yeah. So for
I'm
example,
writing it down.
yeah, key questions, etc. Yeah, great. So moving on to the second, this is, in my opinion, the most interesting part, right? Because we are all naturally attracted to players where they are doing something uh, interesting, right? Or they are making something innovative. Although I must caution you guys, sometimes the boring businesses with hidden moats are the ones that will generate very high returns. Yeah, a return on capitals. Like you see here, they have high ROC because their investments are so low, right? So while we may be intellectually attracted to these kind of businesses, क्योंकि यहाँ पे समझने के लिए कुछ है, something interesting is happening, there's a mystery to unlock, etc. But don't forget, sometimes the most boring businesses have hidden modes like brand and distribution, which make them better businesses at times. However, from an analysis point of view, I think these companies are more interesting to analyze as an intellectual exercise. So these are mostly, so they make active ingredients, technicals, and they export a large part of it. Yeah. So these are mostly B2B businesses, right? You can understand in the value chain that uh, if you are making active ingredients and technicals, then the company which is going to buy it is either the first cohort that we already looked at. Yeah, they are the ones that are going to buy it, or you're going to sell it abroad to export it to another agrochemical marketing company abroad, right? So it's a B2B business, unlike the first cohort. So brand plays less role here in a B2B business. Your capability, etc., they play a bigger role. So there are two distinct business models. Yeah, one is an MNC collaboration-led business model. Another is a generics-led business model. So we saw in the supply chain. I won't go back again to that slide. On the left side you had generics. On the right side you had CRAMS. Right. So this is basically the two types. So in the MNC collaboration, the company collaborates with an innovator to do CDMO CRAMS for an underpatented molecule. Trust and technical capability are key attributes for success as innovator. ये कहाँ चला गया मेरा highlighter? ये अपने आप बंद हो जाता है क्या? अच्छा, I had minimized the presentation once. वाह. So trust and technical capability are key attributes for success. Yeah, we have already understood this, right? Uh, Kunal, why is trust a key attribute for success in CDMO CRAMS business?
So that they don't copy the plan for that
Yeah,
chemical.
yeah. So they don't plan, matlab the intellectual property, the IP, right? Yeah,
Yes,
that's the correct answer.
yes.
They are key attributes for success. PI Industries is the undisputed leader. The others who are trying, and Punjab has succeeded to an extent. They claim that 30% of their revenues come from innovator molecules. Aztec Life Sciences and Bharat Rasayan are others who are trying very hard to increase the share of CRAMS revenues, yeah, or CDMO revenues here. What are the industry characteristics? ROCs are medium because you need to put up investments for factories, etc. Capital intensity for the same reason is high. Margins are better, but because capital intensity is high, ROC is medium. The growth is high. Right now, they are growing at around 20% or more, even in some cases. So this is as an industry is going to grow much faster. That's why it's sort of more exciting, because of the reasons that Gaurav also said, that because of our scientific pool, resource pool, etc., lower cost base and reasons, the good companies which are able to win trust, they can expect to grow at a faster rate because the CDMO trend is only increasing and people are trying to reduce China dependence. So this particular industry is probably going to keep growing fast. Yeah, so they are growing at 2x the nominal GDP of India. High capital intensity because you have to invest in plant setups to manufacture these active ingredients. High barriers to entry because of trust and customer stickiness. Once an innovator has chosen you, it's very unlikely and very costly also for the innovator to suddenly change their CDMO partner. Yeah. The other model is generics-led business model. The company manufactures and sells generic molecules. Companies operating here are all of these. Yeah. Here also medium ROCE, high capital intensity, high growth. Here you need to focus on process chemistry, right? And how efficient your process is, because you will compete on price. So you have to focus on lowering your manufacturing costs. Uh, the pharma equivalent of this industry, the pharma generics business model, that has tremendously high competition. After this presentation, now once go back and look at the price charts of companies like Sun Pharma, Cipla, and all these other exporting companies which make generic molecules, pharma molecules, and export to the US. Okay, look at the price charts from 2015 onwards. मतलब सब एकदम टनल बना के अंदर घुस रहे हैं. ठीक है. So there's huge competition which has come into that space. More and more companies are realizing कि ये हम भी कर सकते हैं. And there has been consolidation on the buyer side. तो पहले यूएसए में क्या होता था, अलग अलग लोग खरीदते थे. तो then you have some negotiating space, right, as a seller, right? अब क्या हो गया, they consolidated. यूएसए realized कि ये तो यार ये इंडियन कंपनीज की मस्ती हो रही है. They consolidated. Now there are only, I think, one or two buyers, and they negotiate every last penny. Okay. So the pharma generics business model is extremely competitive, poor ROCs. The AgChem business is right now less competitive intensity compared to pharma, because China is, I think, less involved here. I don't know the reasons exactly, but right now this is the fact. But you have to always keep in mind that competition can increase here, and if competition increase here, तो ROC फिर गिरने लगेगा. Yeah. So इस particular business model में you have to keep that in mind. So exports from India were 2.5 billion USD. Again, I think this is FY22 data. Yeah. So quickly moving on to the last slide. कोई question है क्या यहाँ पे किसी का? Okay. So the last slide is global AgChem marketing companies. So this is the segment which I had a little bit of difficulty in intuitively understanding कि ये क्या करना चाहते हैं. ठीक है. So if you don't understand completely after this 5 minute discussion, don't worry. Once we read these companies, I think we'll be able to understand better. Okay. So what these companies do is they are basically B2B2C businesses. What they do is uh, they sell formulations to distributors globally, okay? And who in turn sell to retailers, consumers, farmers, whatever, right? So there are global distributors. So just like the cohort one, who were selling to distributors in India, who were selling to farmers, think of this as a global version of that. So these companies sell to distributors globally, who in turn sell to retailers, consumers. But there are some important differences. Yeah. So here, just like the domestic generic companies, the company may or may not manufacture their own formulation. They may get the formulation 100% outsourced. मतलब टेक्निकल और एक्टिव इंग्रेडिएंट से लेके फॉर्मुलेशन पूरा ही आउटसोर्स करती है कई कंपनीज. फॉर एग्जांपल शारदा क्रॉपकेम हैज अ completely asset light model where it outsources 100% production to China. Okay, so it is just a marketing company. Yeah, then you would ask, ठीक है तो इनका value add क्या है? Why cannot another company come in and suddenly do this? Yeah. So what these companies do is they focus on identifying high potential molecules, molecules which are in demand, and then getting them manufactured and then registered in different geographies. So I think this process I don't completely understand. So we need to understand this better. So when you're selling in a new geography, especially in regulated markets of USA, Europe, or Japan, you have to get the molecule registered and also yourself registered as a seller of that molecule. And that registration, I think, happens with a body, with a government body equivalent to FDA, right? So that this process is very time taking. So it can take as long as 6 years to register a product. I don't know why this is. This we need to understand better. And the cost can be between 35 to 55 crores to register one molecule. So this is sort of the barrier to entry, and this is why it's not such an easy business. Yeah, because I think you need to have great relationships on both sides of the supply chain. One is on the sourcing side, where you need to have great relationships with China-based technicals manufacturers or India-based technicals manufacturers. On the other hand, you have to have great relationships with distributors globally in these regulated markets. Also, you have to have a relationship and capability with the government authorities who approve the registrations, right? Because I'm sure for a new company to come in and figure out registrations will be a tough job. So these are the barriers to entry for this global marketing companies. Yeah, we need to understand why this is such a time-taking process and why they cost so much. Yeah, industry characteristics are medium ROC, medium capital intensity, and high growth. High entry barriers due to high cost and effort of compliance. And two main players in India, one is Sharda Cropchem and other is the giant UPL. Yeah. So these are basically the three different kinds of AgChem companies that are there in the Indian universe. So when we are analyzing, suppose you are assigned a company, the first job you have is to sort of bucket them in one of these. Yeah. And then depending on, then go back to the supply chain and start analyzing each of these relationships. Suppose, the company is here, it's making active ingredient technicals, it's part of cohort 2, suppose this cohort. Then you need to start analyzing where is it buying its intermediates from, how much of it is coming from India, how much of it is coming from China. If 90% of the raw materials are coming from India, great, your supply chain is not at risk. If 90% is coming from China, be very careful about the company. कल चाइना ने प्राइस इंक्रीज कर दिया या सप्लाई देने पर मना कर दिया, मतलब कंपनी की वाट लग जाएगी, राइट? सो एनालाइज दिस लेग सेपरेटली. देन यू एनालाइज दीज लेग्स. ये सप्लाई किसको कर रहे हैं? आर दे सेलिंग मोस्टली टू इंडियन B2B कंपनीज और आर दे सेलिंग मोस्टली टू एक्सपोर्ट कंपनीज? Then you need to sort of understand ki where are they playing? Are they playing in generic molecules? Are they playing in CRAMS? Yeah. If they are playing in generic molecules, there can be also different kinds of generic molecules. There are some generic molecules with very high demand, right? Where annual sale runs into very high figures. But there are also hundreds of generic players which are playing in it. So you are a small part of a large market, or the molecule is much smaller, but you choose to be the king in that molecule because you have developed process efficiency, which makes you the lowest cost producer of that particular molecule. So in a small pond, you are the king. What is the approach in generic? Similarly, in CRAMS, are you the only guy manufacturing for the innovator? How many years are left for the patent to expire? Are you gaining market share with the innovator? How is the innovator molecule performing, right? Because if the innovator molecule is performing well and it's going to increase its market share, automatically your company is also going to do better, right? So please realize the power of this diagram once you take your company and use this framework, this simple framework, to start analyzing and asking the right questions. So generate these questions, write them down, and then start your research trying to answer each of these questions. This approach, coupled with our metric sheet, which we have for manufacturing companies, where we thoroughly analyze income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, and other aspects, softer aspects like promoter ownership, along with forensics, board quality, etc., that should give you a fairly good handle on a company, and your analysis should be fairly robust. At least this is how I would approach the analysis to an agrochemical company. Yeah. Yeah, guys, that's all. Any questions? I'll drink some water.
No, great presentation, Nirvan. I think I was looking for something similar.
Thanks, Gaurav.
Yeah.
Guys, any questions?
So not related to this topic, but since I wanted to ask the difference between like ROCE, no ROIC and which one, Gaurav, we were discussing? Ah, yeah,
Uh,
ROCE and
ROIC.
ROIC. Yeah.
So one you use NOPAT and another one you use PAT.
A bit.
EBIT, sorry, EBIT.
Yeah. So basically, Rishikesh, now there are some ROIC now is not a very standard ratio in my eyes. At least
Yeah.
CFA वगैरह में तुम पढ़ोगे भी नहीं कभी, ठीक है? तो
हाँ.
ROIC ये आजकल इंडिया में बहुत फैशन में है, मैं देखता हूँ सब लोग ROIC करते हैं. आई थिंक लाइक प्रैक्टिशनर्स यूज ROIC मोर, ये भी मुझे लगा है. जिनका मान लो आई हैव सीन वेरी एक्सपीरियंस्ड इन्वेस्टर्स use ROIC as the primary metric than ROC. So there's no right or wrong. I don't understand ROIC intuitively. Like मैंने कभी उसको ज्यादा समझा नहीं है, बट फ्रॉम अ फॉर्मूला पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू इट्स एबिट इनटू 1 माइनस टैक्स. मतलब एबिट से अगर तुम टैक्स निकाल लेते हो, दैट इज योर न्यूमरेटर, एंड द डिनोमिनेटर रिमेन्स योर इक्विटी कैपिटल प्लस डेट कैपिटल ऑन द बुक्स, ऑन द बैलेंस शीट. Whereas ROCE is EBIT as the numerator and debt capital plus equity capital as the denominator. Now, one thing for the denominator that I've seen some people do is, if there is cash on the balance sheet, they will subtract that cash from the denominator. Okay, what they will say is, उसका लॉजिक क्या है? उनका लॉजिक ये है कि अगर डेट कैपिटल और इक्विटी कैपिटल तुम डिप्लॉय कर रहे हो लेकिन तुम्हारे पास फ्री कैश पड़ा है, तो यू शुड गिव सम एक्स्ट्रा क्रेडिट्स टू दैट कंपनी, क्योंकि वो कैश वो कभी डिप्लॉय कर सकता है, राइट? सो यू सब्ट्रैक्ट इट फ्रॉम द डिनोमिनेटर एंड पंप अप द ROCE एंड ROIC. बट आई डोंट एग्री विद दैट, बिकॉज कैश अगर बैलेंस शीट पे एक्सेस है, कंपनी शुड बी पेनलाइज्ड फॉर इट. देयर शुड बी नो एक्स्ट्रा क्रेडिट टू द कंपनी. तुम कैश क्यों जमा कर रहे हो? Either take quick decisions, no? Either pay it out as dividends or share buybacks, or if you have so many opportunities, deploy it in the business. So I don't like to give credits to a company for cash on the balance sheet. So मेरे को कभी समझ नहीं आया लोग subtract क्यों करते हैं. अगर तुम्हें समझ में आया तो मुझे समझाना.
नहीं, वैसे बहुत से फॉर्मूले में वैसे करते हैं कैश सब्ट्रैक्ट, जैसे अपने एंटरप्राइज वैल्यू के फॉर्मूला में भी करते हैं.
नहीं, एंटरप्राइज वैल्यू के फॉर्मूला में करने का रीजन अलग है.
हाँ, इसका तो है.
एंटरप्राइज वैल्यू इज बेसिकली, सपोज टुमारो यू हैव टू बाय अ कंपनी, ठीक है? तो एक कंपनी है ऋषिकेश लिमिटेड, निर्वाण को खरीदना है, तो एंटरप्राइज वैल्यू टेल्स यू कि कितना पैसा देने से वो कंपनी में खरीद सकता.
Yeah,
तो
that is
कितना
the
पैसा
logic.
दोगे तुम? तो मार्केट वैल्यू ऑफ डेट और मार्केट वैल्यू ऑफ इक्विटी, ये दोनों को जब तुम ऐड करोगे तो तुमको डेट भी खरीदना पड़ेगा, इक्विटी भी खरीदना पड़ेगा, राइट, टू टेक ओवर दैट
हाँ,
कंपनी।
और कैश
तो
फ्री में मिल जाएगा, इसलिए हम
हाँ, और कैश
सब्ट्रैक्ट कर
फ्री में
रहे
मिल जाएगा तुम्हें, तो इसलिए तुम सब्ट्रैक्ट करते हो। तो दैट हैज अ क्लियर रीजन,
या
बट एटलीस्ट मेरे को नहीं समझ में आया है कि आरओआईसी आरओसी में
हाँ,
नीचे
तो
कैश
वही
सब्ट्रैक्ट।
कंफ्यूजन था मेरा भी, मतलब क्या है ये ROIC क्यों इतना चल रहा
देखो
है ट्रेंड?
ऋषिकेश, एज लॉन्ग एज मेरा इसके बारे में सोचना ऐसा है, एज लॉन्ग एज यू आर नॉट गिविंग एन एक्सेल एग्जाम जहां पे तुम्हें वो करेक्ट नंबर पे आना है ना, एज लॉन्ग एज यू अंडरस्टैंड द कॉन्सेप्ट एंड यू आर एबल टू सॉर्ट ऑफ अंडरस्टैंड कि आरओसी का मतलब है रिटर्न ऑन द टू टाइप्स ऑफ कैपिटल विच हैव बीन इन्वेस्टेड इन द कंपनी। तो डेट कैपिटल पे रिटर्न इंटरेस्ट होता है और इक्विटी कैपिटल पे रिटर्न पैट होता है, राइट। तो अगर मैं पैट प्लस इंटरेस्ट जोड़ू तो दैट इज नथिंग बट नो पैट, EBIT into 1 minus tax, right?
या
तो इसीलिए लोग आरओआईसी यूज करते हैं। एबिट जब यूज करते हो, आरओसी जब करते हो, तो इट्स अ प्री टैक्स मेजर। तो वेदर यू आर यूजिंग अ प्री टैक्स और अ पोस्ट टैक्स, इफ यू आर कंपेयरिंग टू कंपनीज, इट शुडंट मेक अ डिफरेंस ना, इफ बोथ हैव द सेम टैक्स रेट।
सो मोर और लेस दे बोथ आर सेम, बस वो थोड़ा
यार
न्यूमरेटर
देखो,
अगर
कैलकुलेशन में जैसे उस दिन गौरव ने पूछा था भावना को, कल एक्चुअली भावना मेरे से पूछ रही थी कि विच कंपनी गौरव वाज दैट ह्यूज डिफरेंस इन आरओसी एंड आरओआईसी?
It is
Spandana.
Spandana, हाँ, Spandana. So I actually don't understand the calculation also, how it can be so different.
या
तो
आई आल्सो गॉट कंफ्यूज देयर ओनली, लाइक हाई
हाँ
Yeah.
गौरव, if you can figure out यार प्लीज वो चेक करना। I forgot to have a discussion कल, भावना asked me this, I had no answer. So
Yeah.
I don't understand कैसे इतना बड़ा difference हो सकता है।
Yeah, matlab, what I was trying to find were, are there any correlations? Just for example, if your ROE is rising and your ROC is rising, or if there is any divergence, then you understand something about the nature of the business, right?
एग्जैक्टली तो आरओई और आरओसी को तुम
Hmm.
कंपेयर करोगे तो दैट्स एन इंटरेस्टिंग कंपैरिजन। आरओआईसी एंड आरओसी बेसिकली ट्राइंग टू मेजर द सेम थिंग इन टू डिफरेंट वेज, राइट।
या
So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
would not pay too much attention to sort of differences between the two, because at the end of the day you're trying to measure एक post tax measure है, एक pre tax measure है गौरव, that's the difference।
Correct. Correct.
तो उसमें तो टैक्स का ही होगा। आरओई और आरओसी में देखो, आरओई क्या है, पैट डिवाइडेड बाय इक्विटी, राइट, एंड ROCE is EBIT divided by equity plus debt, right? तो अगर तुम्हारा ROE बहुत ज्यादा है, इसका मतलब जनरली यही होगा कि you have very cheap debt, or if your ROE is much higher than your ROCE, then the only explanation that I can immediately think of is तुम्हारा जो debt है वो शायद cheap debt है, तो I तुम्हारा ज्यादा बड़ा नहीं है,
Hmm.
so the interest cost that you are incurring is not as high. So that's the only one that I can think of. But इस पे और सोचेंगे तो I think we
Yeah.
can understand
I
how a
was
company.
reading a blog. I was reading a blog. So if your ROE is rising and
Hmm.
your ROCE is also rising, then probably the money that you're generating is getting distributed equally between your equity as well as your, the debt holders, right?
Makes sense.
So
Makes sense.
shareholders and debt holders. However, if your ROCE is high, but
Yeah.
your ROE is low, from there
Yeah.
you can immediately say that, your debt holders are getting most of the
Correct.
cash or profit that is coming out.
Correct. Correct.
correct.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. That is the right conclusion, I think. That's a very good framework, Gaurav. I've never thought about it like that. Actually, you can make a 2 by 2 matrix of ROE, ROCE,
Hmm.
and actually very nicely illustrate this. This is a nice framework that I've never seen anybody talk about these two ratios like this.
Yeah, from that you kind of discover something about the nature of the
Yeah,
company or the business, how it is done.
correct, correct. No, that's a very good metric. You should note it down somewhere, यार। इसका एक 2 by 2 बना के we can create a framework.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, but ROC, ROIC, and Gaurav, if you find the answer for Spandana, बताना यार, मुझे तो नहीं समझ में आया।
I'm
How
also asking the same question.
there can be a
Why is
3x
it? Because if you look at Shriram, it's same 9%,
yeah,
both, but for the 9% ही था शायद. Anyways, but
जो
it
भी
was
है,
similar. But
Is
for
it
Spandana, it
error
was
or
very
something like that? Maybe.
हो सकता है, error भी हो सकता है।
possible.
ROIC is a standard formula that screener gives क्या? मतलब
हाँ.
चेक करना
Even
पड़ेगा।
5 star actually has a big difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Actually यार, मतलब I've never, the reason that I struggled to answer that question more, Gaurav, was because finance company के लिए कभी calculate ही नहीं किया है ROC, क्योंकि
हाँ
ROE देखते हैं ना जनरली,
Correct.
हाँ
क्योंकि वहां तो डेट
हाँ.
भरा हुआ है बैलेंस शीट में, ROC का कोई मतलब ही नहीं है, तो
वो मतलब केमिकल से कंपनी या मैन्युफैक्चर कंपनी में यूज किया जाता है इसलिए
हाँ
पूछा।
हाँ, मतलब you generally don't use it for financials, so
Right. Got it.
but still there should not be divergence इतना बड़ा, मतलब फॉर्मूला तो आप पास का ही निकलना चाहिए, बट ठीक है, मे बी. एंड ROIC should be less than ROC. How is ROIC 3 times ROC? मेरे को तो कुछ चमका ही नहीं है, क्योंकि डिनोमिनेटर दोनों का सेम है. एक के न्यूमरेटर से टैक्स निकाल रहे हो, एक के न्यूमरेटर में टैक्स है, तो जहां टैक्स निकाल रहे हो वो तो कम होना चाहिए ना.
Right.
मे बी स्क्रीनर के ROIC फॉर्मूला में दे subtract cash or something like that, Gaurav. So we need to probably check the formula what they are using.
Right. So if you look at even Dhanuka Agritech, okay, there also you'll see the ROIC is greater than ROCE. But anyways, we can keep this discussion
Yeah,
for a
this
later
is
time.
interesting then, because this I don't understand this, and maybe it'll be good if we can solve this. If all of you get some time, if you can figure out कि screener के formula में कुछ अलग हो रहा है, या there is some understanding में तो कोई गड़बड़ नहीं होना चाहिए, because ROIC, ROC are fairly simple concepts to understand. But guys, if any of you, whenever you get some free time, if you can spare some time to solve this mystery, it'll be something to learn for me and Gaurav.
I mean, my thought process was something funny going on with the equity part of it. Can we, I mean, from here, equity or denominator में कुछ या फिर numerator में something funny is going on if they are not in line over a period of time. But anyways, we can deliberate on this later on.
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, we can get to that question after we sort of have a handle on क्यों इतना difference आ रहा है.
All right. Okay. Then let's stop recording.
Yeah. So